Hey guys, tonight we're dropping you straight into the cradle of civilization, only instead of inventing writing or marveling at ziggurats. You're a mid-level bureaucrat with a bad back and a worse job. You wake up to the sound of donkeys braying, someone coughing wetly in the courtyard below, and the distant shout of a street vendor advertising onions. Again, you peel yourself off your mud brick rooftop bed, where you've slept for ventilation because your actual room is less cool summer retreat and more human kiln. There's no pillow, of course, just a bundled tunic that still smells faintly of yesterday's spilled barley mash. The good news, you're alive in ancient Mesopotamia, the birthplace of writing, laws, and the idea that grain equals power. The bad news, you're the guy in charge of counting that grain. And nobody likes the person counting the grain. Nobody. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, drop your current location and local time in the comments. Let's see who else is barely staying awake across the globe. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You drag your sandals over sand-slick stairs into the open street of Uruk, dusty, bustling, and deeply committed to the art of chaos. Your tunic, roughly woven from linen that feels like finely shredded parchment, is still damp from your own sweat and a slow roof leak. Your boss, the temple steward, is already scowling by the barley bins. You know this because he's always scowling. That's his only known facial expression, much like a baked brick. Your job, should you choose to accept it, spoiler, you don't get a choice, is to count, collect, and report grain taxes owed to the temple. Because in Mesopotamia, everything flows through temple's grain. Power, offerings, rumors, and unfortunately, responsibilities. You don't carry a sword or a fancy seal. You carry a basket, a chipped stylus, and the sincere hope no one dumps barley over your head today. First stop, the central courtyard, where a scribe with perfect handwriting and perfectly oily hair waits by a tall stack of clay tablets. You're already behind. Someone misplaced the grain record for District 3. Your name's on it. You haven't even had breakfast. Which, by the way, is surprise barley. Your morning rations include a small bowl of barley mush and a half loaf of bread so hard it could legally count as a weapon. You chew it slowly, jaw muscles screaming. And remember that teeth weren't designed to double as grain mills. The water jug is warm and slightly gritty, which is either from silt or the communal ladle that definitely hasn't been washed since Hammurabi was in short pants. Now you're ready for the walk to the outer fields. You sigh, brush a fly off your arm, and begin your trek through alleys lined with reed mats, goat droppings, and at least 3 very bored-looking children playing with a dead frog. They stare at you with the same expression their parents will wear later. 1 part resignation, 1 part disdain. In this job, everyone's mad at you. Farmers, because you take their best grain. Priests, because you never bring enough. Scribes, because you misspell things under pressure. And the gods, you're not even sure. You offered that sacrificial onion last week, and your back still hurts. Maybe they prefer leeks. And yet, strangely, you're considered essential. In the great Mesopotamian wheel of grain-based bureaucracy, you're a greasy little cog. Your clay tablet reports affect temple distributions, worker rations, and royal quotas. 1 error, and someone important doesn't eat. Or worse, someone very important notices you exist. Historians still argue whether temple officials like you were trusted civil servants or tolerated nuisances who made everyone's life just slightly worse. Judging by the tone in that farmer's voice last week when he muttered, "May Enlil bless you with permanent hiccups," you're leaning toward tolerated nuisance. Your daily tools are unimpressive but crucial: a worn stylus shaped like a chewed twig, and an armful of half-dried tablets. You sling them in a reed bag, each one etched with yesterday's counts and the beginning of a dull headache. It's still early, the sun isn't fully murderous yet, and the air smells of dust, donkey, and that distinctive temple oven odor, half incense, half burnt porridge. You stop by a communal chalkboard slab where updates are scrawled: temple construction delayed again, a goat theft in District 5 again, and someone named Nabu's cousin owes 6 measures of emmer wheat. Again. Somewhere in all this routine, you feel the weight of your role, not majestic, not glamorous, but surprisingly vital. The city runs on records, and records don't write themselves. But you know what does right itself, another complaint from the Brewers Guild. And you get to deliver it in person. You shuffle through the narrow alleys like a mobile papyrus with legs. Your arms full of yesterday's complaints and this morning's regrets. The sun now perches a little higher in the sky, like a judgmental god peeking over the rooftops. Everything it touches turns to heat, and everything it misses, well, that just stays damp and smelly. At this point in the day, your feet have already developed that delightful sandy paste blister feeling, and your shoulder is sore from carrying too many tablets in a bag, clearly made for someone with better posture and worse career ambitions. The Brewers Guild sits near the canals, which means mosquitoes and passive aggression come standard. As you approach, the smell hits first yeasty, sharp, and slightly sour, like someone tried to ferment bread and shame in equal measure. A man named Zamu, whose beard is longer than your patience, waves you over. He has a complaint. Of course he does. You brace for impact. Turns out, last week's barley shipment was short by 2 handfuls. That's not a typo, he means literal handfuls. And now the brewers want tax compensation. You hold up your tablet and stylus, which they interpret as a declaration of war. You begin inscribing their complaint in neat cuneiform, while Zamu offers helpful advice like write faster and maybe learn to count. This is the part where you will miss being a goat herder. At least goats, unlike brewers, don't understand sarcasm. After enduring this lengthy festival of blame, you move on to the next joy of Mesopotamian tax bureaucracy, reconciling quotas. The temple accountant, a man who somehow always smells like onions and self-importance, demands grain reports cross-checked with actual inventory. You're pretty sure some of that grain has vanished. You're very sure someone is lying about it. But you're the one stuck rewriting clay records because the previous stylus wielder decided spelling was optional. Historians still argue whether the complexity of Mesopotamian taxation was a feat of genius or a cautionary tale about trusting 4,000-year-old spreadsheets made of mud. You lean toward cautionary tale, mostly because you're now on your 4th attempt to properly tabulate a wagon load of partially sprouted barley. There's no box for kinda moldy in the current tax schema. You wander toward the storage compound to cross-reference stock. The clerk there greets you by name, which is not a good sign. It means you're either important or problematic. He asks you to verify the amounts from District 2, but one of the jars is half empty, sealed with a lid that looks recently disturbed. It's a classic case of grain shrinkage, a term you've invented to explain theft without accusing anyone directly. After all, you're a civil servant, not a hero. A local guard walks by, shirtless and sunburned, muttering something about unlucky omens and rats in the stores. Rats are very real. Omens, unfortunately, are too. You glance at the ziggurat temple, casting its shadow over the courtyard. A bad omen could mean you have to do it all again tomorrow, because clearly, the gods hate efficiency. You try to jot down a quick tally on a fresh tablet, only to realize it's still wet. The stylus gouges the surface. Congratulations, you've just ruined your last usable record for the day. You exhale slowly, imagining what it would be like to be reincarnated as a fish. No taxes, no clay, just swimming and the occasional predator. It's around this time the smell from the canal reaches a new low. You catch a whiff of stagnant water, fermented grain runoff, and despair. You make a mental note to avoid the canal bathers for the next few days, unless you're craving a skin condition with a name the Sumerians never invented. Back at the central office, a junior scribe intercepts you. He has very good news, and by good, he means someone forgot to pay their annual grain tax, and you're now responsible for collecting it in person. The offender, a noble's cousin who insists he's exempt. He probably is, but your boss doesn't care. You go, knock on a decorative wooden door, and are promptly ignored. You knock again, louder. Someone finally opens it, a boy who could be 10 or 20. It's hard to tell under the dirt and disdain. He claims the noble isn't home. You squint, suspicious. You hear chewing behind the curtain. Probably the noble. Possibly a goat. Fringe historians have suggested that grain collectors were often scapegoats for social tension, used to absorb the frustrations of a population that didn't fully understand taxation, but very much understood annoyance. You now understand exactly how that feels. As the sun begins to dip, turning the mud walls a rich gold. Your body aches in places you didn't know had joints. Your tunic clings uncomfortably to your back, and your stylus has worn down to a nub. There's still more to do, more forms to fill, more people to frustrate. And yet, something about it all feels oddly stable. The same frustrations today will be there tomorrow. The same arguments over barley and beer. The same faint scent of onions baked into every professional interaction. You're not changing the world, you're just keeping it spinning. Badly, unevenly, but somehow still spinning. You'd think that after a day filled with grain audits, passive-aggressive temple clerks, and threats from semi-noble tax dodgers, you'd be allowed a moment of peace. But no, peace, like fresh bread or a reliable stylus, is for the elite, and you're a grain tax collector with a full bladder and exactly 0 safe places to empty it. First, you check the public latrine near the edge of the ziggurat plaza. It's technically a pit surrounded by 3 half walls and a well-meaning attempt at privacy, but it's already full of both people and things that you don't want to describe before bedtime. A young shepherd boy comes out holding his nose. That's your sign to move along. You consider your backup option, the canal. Ah yes, Mesopotamia's multi-purpose wonder water source, laundry hub, fish habitat, and most romantically, open-air urinal. You walk toward it, pretending that this is just a casual stroll, not a desperate search for relief. The moment you reach the embankment, a woman dumps a full pot of wastewater into the canal, splashing the surface like it owes her money. You decide against wading in. You start scouting for a more discreet spot, maybe a shadowy alley or behind a storehouse. But with the city's tightly packed architecture and the ever-present risk of being seen by a priest or, worse, a nosy child, even relieving yourself becomes a strategic operation. You finally settle on an alcove behind the scribe school. The irony is rich, you're peeing next to the very wall where tomorrow's bureaucrats learn about civic duty. Historians still argue whether sanitation in early urban centers like Uruk was revolutionary or ruinous. You're leaning toward ruinous, given that every street corner features a pile of waste, a swarm of flies, and what might be either compost or a philosophical statement. But at least you've survived the ordeal. For now, because in ancient Mesopotamia, there's no such thing as flushing. Waste either dries, gets scavenged by animals, or rolls slowly into the canal where it will later greet someone's face during a cleansing dip. Toilets are a community experience, whether you signed up for it or not. You begin to walk back toward your shared quarters, navigating the labyrinthine streets where every second doorway doubles as either a vendor stall or someone's front room. At one junction, you're nearly sideswiped by a bull cart carrying freshly harvested barley. The driver curses in Akkadian. You respond with a vague hand gesture that could mean sorry or your ox has emotional issues. The stink of public waste now clings to your tunic like a jealous ex. And your sandals, made of leather so thin it might as well be ceremonial, have collected a slush of canal runoff, beer dribble, and footprints of regret. It squelches audibly with each step. A fringe theory claims that the Mesopotamians had early forms of sewage tunnels beneath certain cities. If that's true, they're hiding it well. More likely, they just let gravity and heat handle everything. Waste went downhill, flies went uphill, and you went sideways, constantly trying to avoid both. Eventually, you return to your quarters. Technically, you share them with another collector who's never home and a scribe who's always home. He greets you while mid-nose pick and offers some flatbread as compensation. You decline, not because you're too good for snotbread, but because you're still recovering from last week's barley poisoning incident. Inside the tiny clay room, you light a lamp using a wick dipped in fish oil. Romantic, if you're dating a mosquito. You sit on your mat, which smells like someone else's laundry and not in a fresh way. There's no ventilation unless you count the hole in the roof that doubles as a cat highway. Then oh joy, a knock at the door. It's a neighbor. He's upset because someone relieved themselves near his storage amphorae, and he suspects it was a city official. You promise to look into it, which is ancient bureaucrats speak for I absolutely will not. You glance at the only bucket in the room. It's full, and not with water. Tomorrow, you'll have to find a place to dump it without earning the wrath of yet another artisan guild. But that's tomorrow's apocalypse. Tonight, your job is to sleep. You attempt to relax on your mat. Every time you move, it crinkles like stale papyrus. The air is thick and smells like old onions, fish oil, and the neighbor's theory about your bucket. You lie back, close your eyes, and for one blissful second, forget you live in the urinal of history. Then someone outside yells about a stolen goat. The goat yells back, and so ends the quiet part of your evening. You wake up the next morning, not because of the sun, or the roosters, or even the neighbor's goat, which, incredibly, is still yelling. No, you wake up because your stomach is threatening to unionize. A slow rumble turns into a full protest chant. Congratulations, you've survived the urinal that is Mesopotamian sanitation, only to enter the food portion of your historical vacation. And spoiler, it's not getting better. Breakfast is what experts call symbolic, as in, the food exists more as a concept than a source of nourishment. You chew your morning ration of barley bread, which in terms of texture is indistinguishable from roof tile. It takes several minutes to work through one bite, and that's assuming you still have most of your teeth. This bread isn't made fresh every day, it's made in batches and stored in cool rooms, which means you're probably eating last week's floor croutons. And what do you wash it down with? Not water. Don't be ridiculous. That's reserved for drinking animals and unlucky children. You sip thin beer instead, a cloudy, faintly sour brew stored in ceramic jugs and filtered through a straw to avoid the chunky bits. Yes, you are drinking your breakfast through a straw like a toddler, but the kind of toddler who's deeply malnourished and probably has worms. Historians still argue whether Mesopotamian beer was a dietary staple or an emergency hydration strategy. Either way, it's not optional, and while we're at it, no one's handing out mugs or even wooden bowls. You drink directly from a communal vessel, mouth hovering uncomfortably close to your roommate's lip crust. Delightful. Now, let's say you're feeling ambitious. Maybe you want to vary your palate. Maybe you dare to dream of fruit or legumes. Well, hope is a dangerous thing. You manage to trade a small measure of accounting labor, drafting a tally of temple goat donations for a handful of dried figs. They taste like sugar-coated pebbles, but at least they're not more barley. Lunch, if it happens at all, is a cold replay of breakfast. Sometimes you get porridge, which sounds cozy until you realize it's made from leftover grain, mash, the byproduct of the beer brewing process. Think grainy sludge with the emotional presence of betrayal. It's served warmish and scooped with broken pottery shards doubling as spoons. You lose part of a molar on one. One of your colleagues brings out a special treat fish paste. It's not clear what kind of fish. You suspect it's the kind that didn't survive the canal. The paste has been fermented and stored in a sun-warmed jar, which is just a fancy way of saying decaying with flair. You spread it on your barley tile. It spreads like guilt. As for dinner, yes. The triumphant finale. You sit around a communal hearth as someone roasts onions and bitter greens over coals. The smell makes your eyes water in a way that's only 30% emotional. Protein only if you catch the occasional locust in your sleeve. Meat exists, sure, but only if you're wealthy, a priest, or the king's personal dog. You remember hearing once that the palace kitchen served lamb with spices and honey. You also remember that you are neither the palace nor its dog. So your evening meal is again a celebration of endurance. You chew your food slowly, partly because it tastes and partly because chewing gives you something to do that isn't existential despair. But hey, at least the Sumerians invented writing. You use this moment to scratch a record of your dinner into a clay tablet with your stylus. A sarcastic haiku, maybe. Something like bread sharp as a knife, fish paste. Dreams of the river, my stomach weeps slow. Your roommate offers you a date. No, not a romantic one. A dried fruit. You accept it with gratitude. Then remember halfway through that dates in this era are sometimes infested with larvae. You finish chewing anyway, at this point. You welcome the protein. A fun fringe tidbit, some ancient cookbooks suggest recipes for temple offerings that include ingredients nobody could afford, like cinnamon from distant lands or fine oils from Anatolia. It's like reading a modern food blog where the first ingredient is hand-milked yak yogurt from a glacial meadow. Inspiring, but useless. You think about growing your own food, but you live in a city with no real garden space and an irrigation system that's as unpredictable as your neighbor's temper. So you let that fantasy dissolve like barley and beer. At last, you lie back on your mat, stomach bloated from starch and regret. You dream of flavor. You dream of grilled meat and fresh fruit and a cold glass of water that doesn't also function as a bacterial theme park. But mostly, you dream of a future where bread isn't a medieval punishment and fish doesn't scream softly as you eat it. Morning comes again, dragging your stiff body with it. And today you get to contemplate another cheerful Mesopotamian reality, what's wrapped around your bloated, starch-fueled figure. Spoiler, it's not comfort, style, or dignity. It's something called clothing, though that's a generous term. You're wrapped in a rough woolen tunic that feels like it was woven from the broken dreams of sheep. It's not dyed, it's not soft, and it definitely wasn't washed, because no one washes wool here. Not unless they enjoy shrinking it into a scratchy crop top and smelling like a wet barn. The smell of your outfit equal parts sweat, dust, and maybe I rolled in barley beer last week clings like shame. You try to remember how long you've worn this single garment. The answer is yes. Just yes. And here's the kicker, that itchy wool tunic, it's your good outfit. You own one, if you're lucky. You also have a spare loincloth, but only if you bribe the temple laundress with 2 onions and a bad joke. This single tunic lifestyle means you're basically fermenting inside your own clothing, a human crockpot. It's all very artisanal. Footwear is optional, which is to say no one has any. You walk barefoot across sun-baked mud, broken pottery shards, and the occasional goat turd, or if you're blessed, you have sandals made of reed matting, which soak up every liquid they touch and retain scent like a cursed sponge. You remember last week's fish spill and briefly consider cutting your feet off. Parasites, meanwhile, are your true fashion accessories. Fleas are standard, lice are enthusiastic. Some grain collectors even talk about their lice as if they were co-workers. That one's Greg. He prefers the left armpit. You try not to scratch too hard because open sores are the gateway drug to infection. And infections are the Mesopotamian equivalent of filing bankruptcy. Historians still argue whether these garments were considered status symbols or simply functional. The distinction is academic when your tunic smells like despair and you're using sand as body powder. But archaeologists have found signs of careful embroidery on certain ceremonial robes. So maybe you could dream of a scratchy outfit with decorative sadness stitched into it. Your co-worker Iltani has a linen tunic, the high-end fabric of the ancient world. Light, breathable, and imported from Egypt. It cost her cousin 3 goats and a piece of farmland. She wears it smugly, until a stray coal burns a hole in it during lunch. You pretend not to laugh, but your tunic itches approvingly. As the sun climbs higher, so does the temperature. Your wool, of course, traps the heat like an angry blanket. You consider removing it, but public nudity is frowned upon unless you're part of a fertility ritual or completely out of hope. You're not there yet. But give it time. There's a rumor that the priests have fragrant oils and special body cloths. You, however, make do with a damp reed sponge and the breeze. And by sponge, we mean clump of damp fiber you share with 3 other people. No one knows where it was yesterday. Everyone pretends not to care. You shuffle through the storage yard, where sacks of grain sit beside scribes and stray dogs. Your tunic is now sweat glued to your back, and your sandal just exploded on a sharp pebble. That's fine. Fashion is pain, and so is walking. A quirky tidbit, some high officials supposedly powdered their bodies with crushed gypsum mixed with oil, which gave them a ghostly pale glow under the sun. You wonder if that helped with lice or just made them look like half-baked pastries. Either way, the average tax collector never sees a gypsum spa day. You're stuck with dust and dreams. Later in the day, a sudden windstorm kicks up fine desert grit. It embeds itself into the fabric of your tunic like it's signing a lease. You try to shake it off, but succeed only in redistributing the itch. The wind also brings with it a distinct smell of animal pens, open drains, and yes, sweaty humans in wool. You see a young child running barefoot through the alleys, chasing a goat with a stick. He wears nothing but a frayed loincloth and seems perfectly content. For a moment, you envy him. Then he steps on a beetle and howls like a Babylonian banshee. Perspective restored. By sundown, your clothing has absorbed enough sunlight to roast an onion. Your feet are cracked, your armpits are tender, and you're certain something is nesting in your neckline. You dream again of linen, or cotton, or anything that doesn't feel like exfoliating sandpaper wrapped in trauma. You return home and peel the tunic off your skin like a sticker off a hot car. You give it a half-hearted shake and hang it over a reed rack. That's your laundry. No water, no soap, just wind and denial. Still, you remind yourself, you are clothed, you have a roof. Of sorts. You aren't naked in the desert or wandering the city in a burlap sack. That's reserved for criminals. Probably, so you crawl into bed, wrapped again in wool, parasites, and the quiet dignity of a Mesopotamian tax bureaucrat who no longer feels their skin. You wake before the sun because your mouth feels like a cracked clay pot, left out in the ziggurat courtyard for a week. It's dry, it's gritty, and something sharp is nestled near your molars, probably yesterday's barley shell or a splinter of ancient regret. You try to swallow, but your throat feels like it's lined with raw rope. Congratulations. You've entered the dental hygiene chapter of your grain tax collector adventure, also known as How to Suffer Quietly Until Your Teeth Abandon You. There are no toothbrushes in your house, no minty freshness, no floss. The most advanced oral care you can afford is occasionally chewing on a stick, if you remember, and maybe rinsing your mouth with beer. Which is fine, since it's the closest thing you've got to an antiseptic. Beer the beverage, the mouthwash, the life strategy. Historians still argue whether people in Mesopotamia really chewed aromatic sticks like the later miswak used in Islamic regions. But even if you do have a splintery twig handy, let's be honest, it's not going to save you from your growing mouth disaster. Let's take inventory. The front teeth slightly yellowed, chipped, a bit crooked, serviceable. The molars full of tiny pits and stains from years of eating sandy flour and charred grains. Your gums tender, puffy, if they could speak. They'd scream. One tooth in the back throbs with every heartbeat, pulsing like a miniature demon who resents your entire career. You try to ignore it, but as the sun rises and the streets fill with shouting merchants and braying donkeys, the pain becomes your personal god. It's angry. It demands attention. It wants tribute in the form of agony. Medicine in your world doesn't understand bacteria. Germ theory is 4,000 years in the future, and even the best healers believe pain comes from unbalanced spirits or divine punishment. Your options are limited crushed herbs, spells, or, if you're very lucky, a metal hook and someone with a strong grip. The temple apothecary offers to smear your gums with a paste made from crushed garlic, clay, and sacred goat water. You don't ask what the last ingredient means. You just nod while it burns your mouth and your dignity simultaneously. Later in the day, the pain spikes. You can't chew, you can barely speak. Your colleague Taram Sin suggests seeing a bone setter who once removed a tooth using a copper chisel and a very determined chicken farmer. You decline. For now. Meanwhile, your breath is starting to scare off livestock. You try chewing on a bitter root that smells like sadness and tastes like despair. It doesn't help the pain, but at least your mouth now resembles a compost pit, which is probably closer to authenticity. One fringe theory claims that ancient Mesopotamians believed worms lived in their teeth and caused cavities by wriggling around. You wouldn't be surprised. Something is certainly wriggling in there. As your day drags on, the pain spreads like gossip. It creeps into your temple. Your jaw stiffens. You develop a lazy squint on one side that makes you look either mysterious or slightly cursed. People start offering you space at meetings, not out of respect, but because you look like you're about to bite them out of sheer spite. You try to eat a soft lentil cake. It crumbles gently against your lips, but still sends a lightning bolt into your skull when it touches the wrong spot. You give up and just drink the beer. The barley sludge coats your teeth like a warm apology. You pretend it's helping. By dusk, you make a decision that tooth has to go. Your neighbor's cousin, Ishku, is not a dentist. He's not even a healer. He's a potter. But he has a strong hand and a pair of bronze tongs he claims once fixed a goat's hoof. You sit on a stool, grip the arms, and try not to cry as he yanks with all the grace of a sledgehammer. The pain is indescribable. Your soul leaves your body, your brain turns to paste, and your ancestors briefly appear in the room, offering you condolences. Then it's out. You're bleeding. Dizzy and weirdly proud, you hold the tooth in your hand like it's a trophy from a battle you absolutely lost. Ishku pats your back and offers you beer. You accept it because that's your post-op care plan. Warm alcohol and denial. You stumble home with a gap in your smile and a new appreciation for every person who dies with all their teeth. Before bed, you poke at your aching gums and wonder if they'll ever stop throbbing. Probably not. Another tooth will go soon. You can already feel it plotting its escape. But for now, you lie on your mat, swaddled in scratchy wool, your breath scaring off nearby insects. And you think maybe tomorrow you'll chew on that cleaning stick. Or maybe you'll just give up and embrace the rot. After all, the gods give and the gods take, and apparently, they've taken your enamel. Your dreams are interrupted by shouting again. But this time, It's not because of gossiping neighbors or a goat trying to eat your thatch roof. It's because today is tax collection day. And you, my brave and slightly decaying friend, are the grain tax collector. You roll off your mat, clutching your jaw, still sore from yesterday's dental adventure. There's a slight throb, but you've graduated from constant agony to persistent ache. A win. By ancient Mesopotamian standards, you dress same itchy linen tunic, same belt that smells like sun-baked sweat. You lace your sandals and step outside into the sun, which greets you like a slap. The air is already thick with dust, donkey breath, and the unmistakable scent of unpaid obligations. Being a tax collector sounds powerful on paper, but in practice, it means walking miles from farm to farm, weighing sacks of barley, and arguing with people who'd rather give up their children than part with last season's harvest. Your job is part bureaucrat, part accountant, part bouncer, except there's no club, no music, just angry villagers and fields of mud. You begin your day with a quick visit to the temple granary, your version of a bank vault. Inside, it smells like 1,000 old sandals and dry grain. Scribes scurry around with clay tablets, inscribing records using styluses that double as personal defense weapons. One of them, Ninsen, hands you a freshly baked receipt tablet, warm and slightly smudged. You squint at the cuneiform. It's a list of people who forgot to pay last season. You sigh. Today's going to be long. Your satchel contains nothing but the tablet, a dull stylus, and a small wooden scale. You carry no weapon. That's what your glare is for. Your first stop is Enlil Idun's farm. He greets you with a fake smile and an empty sack. Claims a flash flood destroyed his crops. You raise an eyebrow. The flood was 3 months ago, and his field looks more like a vacation spot for frogs than a disaster zone. You point to the tally from last year. He owes 2 full jars of barley. He counters with a chicken. You counter with sarcasm. Eventually, he offers 1 jar and a loaf of bread that might technically be edible. You mark it on your tablet, pretending not to notice the faint mold. Historians still argue whether collectors like you had set quotas or just operated on vibes and peer pressure. But either way, you're under pressure to deliver. By noon, your back aches from walking, your hands are covered in dust, and your mouth tastes like a sun-baked sandal. You pause in the shade of a fig tree and try to nibble your lunch, a piece of yesterday's lentil cake and a thin slice of dried meat that might be goat, might be shoe leather. You wash it down with warm beer from a gourd, because cool beer is reserved for kings and priests. And you are neither. Then it's on to the next farm. This one belongs to a widow who lost her husband to a donkey-related accident. Don't ask. She apologizes profusely but can't pay. You sigh and record her name with a sad little asterisk. You'll probably be blamed for the shortfall, or worse, made to pay it yourself. You wipe your forehead. The sun's now directly overhead. Your tunic clings to you like a judgment. You trudge through mud, greet hostile farmers, inspect moldy granaries, and avoid stepping on sleeping pigs. One man throws a rock at you. It misses. Barely. You note his name for a possible accidental audit later. Later, as you cross a footbridge that creaks like it's made of regret. You reflect on your career path. You could have been a potter, or a brewer, or even a professional mourner, yes. That's a real job. But no, you had to be good at math. That's the thing about Mesopotamia. If you can count, you get cursed with responsibility. As the sun begins to dip, you haul your collected grain back toward the temple granary. It's not enough. You know it. Ninsen knows it. The gods probably know it too. But you smile tightly as you hand over your tablet and your half-filled sacks. He doesn't say anything, just stamps the tablet with an official seal and adds it to a growing stack of bureaucratic disappointment. You head home exhausted, dusty, and oddly relieved. Your body hurts in 7 places. Your sandals are held together by divine mercy. But you're alive, and you have a roof. And miracle of miracles, no one tried to stab you today. You sit down on your mat, unbuckle your sandals, and pull out your splintered chewing stick. You scrub at your teeth out of stubbornness, knowing it won't help, but needing to pretend it might. Tomorrow, the scribes might demand you explain your shortfall, or they might forget. The gods are fickle. So are accountants. The day ends with the wind whispering through your window slats. You listen to the city settle, a donkey braying, a baby crying, someone shouting about stolen figs. You close your eyes and drift towards sleep, knowing that tomorrow will be exactly the same, and somehow, that's comforting. It rains in Mesopotamia, but not as often as you'd like. And when it does, it doesn't politely drizzle, it hurls mud from the sky like the gods are making soup and forgot the lid. Unfortunately for you, tax collection doesn't get postponed for weather. The barley must flow, rain or shine, sandstorm or sleet. You wake up soaked because your roof leaks. Not a poetic drip-drip you can fall asleep to, but a consistent splash right onto your hip. You roll over and bump into your grain satchel still damp from yesterday. Your tunic smells like mildew and desperation. And outside, your street is less pathway of civilization and more toddler's finger-painting project made entirely of mud. You dress and step out carefully, squishing through puddles the color of lentil stew. Your sandals flap with each step like wet laundry in the wind. Welcome to Mesopotamian winter. It's only slightly less miserable than Mesopotamian summer. When the wind blows, it brings sand, rain, or both. And your house, made of sun-dried bricks and good intentions, provides as much insulation as a paper bag. You wrap your tunic tighter, not because it helps, but because it gives you the illusion of effort. The air smells like damp straw and damp goat and damp everything. In a land where baked bricks are everything, walls, roads, even some furniture moisture is basically a slow apocalypse. But just wait until summer. As months pass, the temperature climbs like a child chasing a cat. Your home becomes an oven with windows. No breeze dares enter. And your sleep is punctuated by sweating, tossing, and the occasional scorpion. You take to sleeping on the roof, which offers a breeze and also bird droppings. You learn to live with both. Clothing doesn't help. In winter, your linen tunic soaks up water and sticks to your skin like regret. In summer, it turns into a portable sauna. There's no wool here, thank the gods, but that doesn't mean you're comfortable. You layer it with a sash that absorbs sweat like it's in training for priesthood. By midday, you resemble a salted fish dried on the outside, half cooked within. Now, work doesn't stop for weather. Of course not. You still march from field to field, forehead glistening, feet squelching, stylus sticky with grime. The temples don't care that you nearly passed out in the barley bins. The gods demand order, and order, oddly enough, requires you to keep walking through puddles while reciting grain tallies from memory. Historians still argue whether Mesopotamian cities had public water management systems robust enough to handle monsoon runoff. Judging from the current state of your ankles deep in sludge, the answer is not in your neighborhood. To cool off, you occasionally dunk your head in an irrigation canal. It's muddy. Yes, and probably full of bacteria modern scientists would lose sleep over. But it feels divine. Until, of course, a frog swims up your nose. Then it feels like vengeance. Insects love the weather, mosquitoes in the marshlands of the south, flies in the highlands, and beetles everywhere else. They treat your body like a buffet. You itch so much, it becomes background noise, like a constant hum of historical suffering. You once tried coating your arms in sesame oil to keep the bugs away, ended up attracting a dog. Lesson learned. Your home, despite being structurally questionable, tries its best to shield you. Mud brick walls regulate heat somewhat until they melt. You recall last year's incident, when an entire side of your neighbor's home slumped into the street after a storm. He now lives in a tent made of reeds in embarrassment. There are fans, technically big palm leaf contraptions, waved by children or unlucky servants. You are neither rich nor influential. So your fan is a broken basket lid. You wave at yourself while muttering about poor career choices. And then there's the mold. It grows on everything: bread, clothes, corners of the house. Your neighbor's ear don't ask. One day you try cleaning it with a cloth soaked in beer. It smells worse afterward. But at least you tried. The temple granary doesn't offer relief either. In summer, it's a hot box where grain sweats and so do you. In winter, it turns into a dripping cave, the ceiling weeping condensation while the floor swallows your sandals. You once sneezed and caused a mini grain avalanche. Nobody helped. They were too busy laughing. You remember when you were young and dreamed of being a priest. The fancy robes, the cool shade of the ziggurat, the hymns. Then someone told you priests fasted often, and you abandoned the idea immediately. A life without food was too risky. So here you are, sweating or shivering, usually both. But there's one tiny pleasure, stars. On summer nights, when your roof isn't actively collapsing, you lie there and watch the heavens. The air finally stills. You hear crickets instead of shouting, and above you constellations your ancestors named after battles, gods, and unfortunately, shaped fish. You exhale. It's not enough to redeem the heat stroke, the mildew, the bug bites, but it's something. Still, every season reminds you that in ancient Mesopotamia, weather wasn't background, it was a character in your story. Loud, inconvenient, and always trying to kill you. Water, the thing you need to live, yet also the thing most likely to kill you. In Mesopotamia, it's the liquid equivalent of a frenemy, absolutely necessary, completely unpredictable, and mildly toxic. You wake up thirsty, parched, your mouth dry as a cuneiform tablet. So you do what any normal Mesopotamian grain collector would do: drink from the canal. Now, that canal has many uses: irrigation, waste disposal, sometimes bathing, occasionally fish farming, and once, famously, funeral rites. So every sip comes with the thrilling risk of disease, surprise eels, and the faint taste of ancient laundry. And yet, your other option is dying of thirst, or shelling out a day's wage for beer, which is basically just slightly cleaner liquid bread. See, beer is safer than water because it's boiled, fermented, and guarded by the gods of barley. But drinking it all day turns you into a mildly dizzy, perpetually burping civil servant. Also, it's warm, flat, and smells like regret. But it doesn't kill you immediately. Bathing, on the other hand, might. Bathing is rare not because you're lazy, but because it's dangerous. The local saying goes, a clean man is a man the demons can see clearly. The logic is that scrubbing your skin opens your pores, which is like sending out party invitations to every illness in town. So you bathe only when you're ordered to or preparing for a ritual. In either case, you approach the water like it's radioactive, because it kind of is. You head to the river, strip down behind a patch of reeds, or just wave awkwardly at passing fishermen, and ease yourself in. The water is shockingly cold or worryingly warm, never the temperature you want. You scrub yourself with sand and a handful of mystery herbs. And when you emerge, you're cleaner, sure, but also covered in suspicious bites and vaguely worried you just angered a water deity. Historians still argue whether Mesopotamians truly avoided bathing out of spiritual fear, or if it was just inconvenient. You suspect both. Ritual cleanliness matters, but so does not freezing to death or getting eaten by crocodiles. Toilets. Oh, sweet summer child, there are no toilets, not like you're imagining. Anyway, some households have clay pots or designated corners. Wealthier homes might boast a drainage pipe leading to a cesspit. But for most of the population, including, sadly, you, relieving yourself is a choose-your-own-adventure experience. You squat behind a wall, under a stairwell, near a goat. And afterward, you cover it with dirt and shame. Public sanitation doesn't exist as a concept. Waste flows with the water straight into the canals you bathe in, drink from, and sometimes sit beside while writing tax tallies. It's a circle of life, Mesopotamian edition, and you're right in the middle of it. Every now and then, you get an infection. Your eyes water, your stomach flips, and you say goodbye to several pounds in a single afternoon. Then, somehow, you recover. Or you don't. There's no middle ground. Water is also political. As a grain collector, you know exactly which canals irrigate which fields. You know when floods are expected and who built which levee. And you know, painfully well, who's not paying their water tribute. You have to count every drop, every bucket diverted from the Tigris. Because if someone steals water, their crops flourish, and they might try to hide that abundance from the tax rolls. The temple is obsessed with water measurements. Priests track flood patterns, rainfall, and dream omens involving fish. You once spent 3 days watching a single puddle evaporate because your supervisor believed it revealed the god's opinion on barley taxation. Spoiler, the gods were unimpressed. Rainfall itself is rare and erratic. When it comes, it's a blessing. Except when it comes too hard and washes away the roads, or the houses, or your uncle's prized ox. You've seen it all. The Euphrates giveth, and the Euphrates taketh away with shocking efficiency. Even the vocabulary around water is fraught. A canal is not just a canal, it's a lifeline, a debt ledger, a legal boundary, and sometimes a murder scene. You once found a goat in one, bloated and possibly cursed. You told your boss. He shrugged and added a wet goat tax to the nearby village. There is no safe time of day to drink water. Morning still smells like last night's offerings. Midday, too hot evaporates before you can cup it. Evening suspiciously cloudy, so you ration your beer, suck on dates to keep the saliva flowing, and pray to Enki, the water god, for forgiveness or a mild case of diarrhea. One day, you hear of a nearby town with a freshwater well. Crystal clear, sweet tasting, drawn from deep underground. You travel there on your day off, excited, hopeful. You arrive and find it surrounded by guards. The water is reserved for priests. You sigh, sit down, and sip your backup beer. It's warm, of course it is. And so, day by day, water remains the silent antagonist in your story. It betrays you, poisons you, hides from you, and still demands your loyalty. You live by it, you fear it, you carry it in clay jugs that crack, leak, or mysteriously disappear. But you can't quit it, not now, not ever. Because in ancient Mesopotamia, death may come by blade, beast, or bureaucracy, but most likely, it's coming by cup.
Hey guys, tonight we travel back, way back, to the Han Dynasty. No Wi-Fi, no toothbrush, no rights. Just you, barefoot and itchy, waking up somewhere in the dust of ancient China around 150 BCE. You're a peasant, probably one of 50 million. But don't worry, your job is essential. Planting millet and slowly dissolving from back pain. The good news? You're alive. The bad news? So are fleas, bureaucracy, and seasonal famine. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Let me know your location and local time down in the comments. I love seeing how far this sleepy little corner of history travels. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You wake up in a Han village as the rooster screams directly into your dreams. It's not your rooster, it's communal, like the toilet and the shovel and the sense of overwhelming despair. Your sleeping mat is woven straw, mostly horizontal, sometimes damp. No pillows, no support. The only thing cushioning your body is the exhaustion from the day before. You try to roll over, but the mat crackles like firewood and reminds you, yep, your shoulder still doesn't work. Or maybe that's just what being 23 feels like in the Han Dynasty. Basically elderly. Your house is one room. Mud brick walls, wooden beams, a thatched roof that's half roof, half draft delivery service. There's a central hearth that smokes more than it cooks, and it's probably still warm from last night's attempt to boil rice. The floor is dirt. Not a little dirty, just dirt. If it rains, it's a puddle. If it's dry, it's a dust bowl. Either way, your bare feet don't thank you. You live with your extended family. All of them. That includes your uncle, who coughs like he's auditioning for a ghost story, your aunt who mutters about astrology, and your cousin who might have stolen your last dumpling. You also share your space with chickens, who definitely did. There's no privacy. You wake up in a pile of limbs, warm breath, and the soft clucking of poultry rights violations. If you want to change clothes, too bad. You only have one outfit. So unless you've mastered the ancient art of public nudity confidence, you just dust off yesterday's grime and keep going. The air smells like life, in the worst way. Smoke, sweat, rice, dampness, maybe something died in the corner, hopefully just a beetle, and the distant scent of manure from your neighbor's yak. That's right, he has a yak. Status. You hear someone already moving outside. Probably your mother grinding millet, or your father sharpening something terrifyingly ambiguous. Time doesn't work the same here. There are no clocks, just the sun, the shadows, and the screech of obligation. You stretch. Every joint crackles like ancient parchment. You're 20-something, but you have the spine of a seasoned philosopher. Not from reading scrolls, though, from squatting, lifting, carrying, squatting again, and then regretting all of it during the 5 minutes you're allowed to lie still. You duck your head outside, and the cool morning air slaps you awake with a soft layer of dust. The sky is orange, the road is dirt, and the neighbors are already arguing. Something about goats, or taxes, or goat taxes. Who knows? Historians still argue whether most Han peasants were truly as destitute as the records suggest, or whether we've romanticized their misery in hindsight. But standing here now, barefoot and itchy, listening to someone yell about a broken hoe, you're pretty sure the misery was very real, and not at all poetic. Your stomach growls. So does a dog. Could be yours. Could be someone else's. Could be a wolf. Welcome to the suburbs, Han style. You step back inside, trying not to stub your toe on a jug of water that hasn't been cleaned since the Qin dynasty. You grab your belt, which is actually a rope, and your robe, which used to be beige and now identifies as ambiguous brown. You're awake. Congratulations. You've made it to the starting line of a day you absolutely didn't sign up for. The first breath you take outside is technically air. It just happens to come pre-seasoned with dust, ash, animal hair, and a vague hint of fermented tofu from 3 huts down. Welcome to another glorious Han morning. You shuffle toward the communal courtyard where 5 other families also pretend they're alone. It's not even sunrise, and someone's already yelling at a pig. Another person is emptying a chamber pot into a ditch. The pig, honestly, seems like it has the better gig. Your body still aches from yesterday's efforts in the field. You worked until your hands felt like dry roots. Your spine, it's turned into a polite suggestion. As you walk, your knees creak like the wooden carts the merchants drag through the town square. Historians still debate whether Han peasants suffered more from malnutrition or chronic musculoskeletal wear. But let's be honest, why not both? You find your families grinding stone and resume your favorite morning activity, pulverizing millet into the dust that will become breakfast sludge. It's a circle of futility, round and round, like time. Or the bureaucracy. Because yes, you also owe taxes, not in coins. Who do you think you are, an aristocrat? You pay in grain, in labor, in back pain. A fly lands in your eye. You blink. It wins. Nearby, your mother is brushing rice husks from a woven mat with what is, in modern terms, the most ineffective broom in the history of sweeping. It's a branch, a literal branch. She offers a grunt, which is basically good morning around here. You nod back in peasant. Breakfast is boiling on the hearth, a term that suggests something exciting. It's not. It's congee. Watery, bland, occasionally crunchy from something that probably shouldn't be crunchy. You slurp it down like your life depends on it, because it does. You eat while squatting. Chairs are for royalty, monks, and your uncle when he's pretending his hemorrhoids are divine punishment. You eat quickly because your little brother is eyeing your portion like a hawk with a grudge. The walls of your home don't block sound. You hear everything: arguments, sneezes, mysterious clanking. Someone's already reciting poetry in the distance. Must be the scholar's son again. You hate him. He gets to learn characters. You get to carry buckets. At some point, a government inspector will wander through the village, pretending to care about your crops while noting whether your taxes are paid. He might carry a bamboo tally sheet. He might also carry a stick. You try not to make eye contact. Eye contact invites responsibility, or suspicion, or worse, conscription. You briefly consider pretending to be dead, but that trick only works once, maybe twice if you're lucky and covered in enough straw. You tie your robe with a loose knot and head out toward the terraced fields. Millet doesn't plant itself. Well, actually, some of it does, because birds steal it, poop it, and accidentally invent random agriculture, but that's beside the point. The earth is cracked. It hasn't rained in weeks. Your feet leave prints in the dry soil like you're writing a novel no one will read. You join a dozen others, all bent like question marks. This is the posture of the Han dynasty. Humble, aching, eternally hopeful, and just a little bit soggy from foot sweat. A passing cart reminds you of the elite, those who live in the cities with walls, real roofs, and actual toilets. You dream of Luoyang, of silk robes, of maybe eating something that once had a heartbeat. But you're not dreaming now. You're hoeing a field, dodging ants the size of regrets, and wondering how your ancestors managed to invent paper but not hammocks. Still, there's beauty. You glance up. The morning mist is lifting, revealing the distant mountains, craggy outlines like sleeping dragons. Birds flutter. A child laughs. A goat screams. Balance. Mainstream records say Han peasants were the backbone of the empire, which is funny because yours is broken. Quirky tidbit? There's a thing called ancestor tablets, tiny plaques at home altars where your family honors the dead. If you break a tool or swear too loudly, you're supposed to apologize to them. You mutter an apology, just in case. You glance at the sun. It's still morning. Your stomach is already planning a mutiny. The day has barely begun. Let's talk about your first real emergency of the day. No, not another tax visit. Not another broken hoe handle. It's something more urgent, more explosive. You need to use the toilet. Except, spoiler alert, there isn't one. Not unless you count a hole in the ground, shared by a rotating cast of villagers, chickens, and existential despair. Toilets in the Han dynasty are a social experiment, and often a small public event. You shuffle toward the latrine pit, clutching your stomach like it's a bag of loose marbles. In theory, your village has a designated waste area, just past the pigs, before the bamboo grove, and slightly downwind of shame. In practice, it's a shallow trench that occasionally collapses during rainstorms, which makes every visit a gamble. Will it hold, or will it be your turn to become part of the fertilizer? The latrine consists of 2 wobbly planks set over the pit. You squat. You hope. You try not to breathe. There is no privacy. You can make intense eye contact with 3 other people also squatting, each of you pretending this moment isn't happening. No toilet paper, of course. That's a Han-era fantasy. What you get is bamboo slips, thin, sharp-edged, and spiritually offensive. It's like trying to wipe with an angry bookmark. Some villagers use straw. The brave use leaves. The desperate just waddle away and pretend nothing happened. Historians still argue whether silk scraps were ever used for wiping in elite homes. But you don't live in an elite home. You live with splinters. You stand, adjust your robe, and avoid looking down. No one ever looks down. The smell follows you like a loyal dog with bad boundaries. Occasionally, a government edict suggests composting waste to fertilize crops. So congratulations, you're now part of the food cycle. Literally. The good news? You're sustainable. The bad news? So is the dysentery. Let's say, in your moment of weakness, you decide to go closer to your house for convenience. That's not illegal, but it is frowned upon. You'll probably be scolded by someone's grandmother, who has very strong feelings about hygiene for someone with zero soap and a pet duck in her kitchen. Urban dwellers, if you ever get to visit a real city, might boast about their toilets, which are fancy ceramic pots that get emptied into the street. Yep, just flung out the window like confetti made of bad decisions. You'd better duck, or not inhale, or both. Some wealthier neighborhoods have stone toilets with drainage systems. The problem? That drainage goes straight into the river, which is also where you collect drinking water. You've now entered what scholars call the loop of doom. Drink water, use water, contaminate water, repeat until revolution, or cholera. But back to your village. Some of the wealthier families have slightly raised outhouses. These are status symbols. If you're lucky, you get to clean one, with your hands, and a bucket. A bucket you will then carry past the neighbors while trying to look cool and failing, because everyone knows what's in the bucket, leeway. Speaking of buckets, nighttime toileting is a unique kind of misery. You don't want to stumble through a snake-infested field in the dark, so you do your business in a clay pot inside the hut, shared by 6 people, a chicken, and the ghost of fresh air. In the morning, someone's job is to empty it. Often it's the youngest child, or you, or both, if fate has decided you need character development. It's during this morning ritual that you understand the core philosophy of Han peasantry: endurance. You don't solve problems, you survive them, one bucket at a time. To lighten the mood, here's your quirky fact of the day. Some Han scholars believed that emotions could affect your digestion. If you're sad, your spleen might rebel. Angry, your intestines might throw a tantrum. So yes, emotional constipation was very much a thing. You finish your business, sort of wash your hands with water that looks like it's already been used twice, and mentally prepare for another 14 hours of squatting, but this time in the fields. The smell never fully leaves. It lingers on your robe, in your hair, deep in your soul. You consider burning everything. You can't. Firewood is for cooking. Suffering is for character. You walk back past the communal pigs. One snorts in your direction. It smells better than you. You nod respectfully. You will never take modern plumbing for granted again. Time for breakfast. Or, more accurately, the ceremonial act of pretending to eat. You shuffle toward the hearth, where a pot has been simmering for several hours, maybe days. It's hard to tell. This mysterious concoction is pottage, a noble name for what is, essentially, edible mud. You stare into the pot. It stares back. Pottage is made from whatever the village hasn't run out of yet. Some old millet, maybe a wrinkled turnip, possibly last week's cabbage leaf. It's thick, greyish, and faintly judgmental. You scoop a bowl, careful not to dislodge the film growing on top. The smell is earthy, if by earthy you mean haunted swamp. You bring it to your lips and take a bite. It's not good, but it is technically food. You chew with the enthusiasm of someone chewing a contract they didn't read. Next comes the bread, or the thing that claims to be bread. It's a solid wedge of millet flour and crushed hopes, baked until it resembles a paving stone. You knock it against the table. It makes a noise. You knock it against your own skull. Same noise. Congratulations. You now own a medieval concussion simulator. Some days, to stretch the flour, people mix in powdered tree bark or ground straw. You eat it anyway, because hunger makes bad decisions look reasonable. The bread doesn't crumble. It crumbles you. You glance at the drink options. Water? Not unless you want to relive your toilet trauma. So you grab the safer alternative, beer. Not the frothy IPA kind, no. This is unfiltered, lukewarm millet beer, chunky with grain particles and existential regret. But it's fermented, which means it's less likely to kill you. It might even dull your memories of breakfast. Cheers. Historians still argue whether meat was a weekly, monthly, or purely ceremonial treat. Either way, there's none today. The village had a pig last week, but it escaped. Rumor has it, the pig now lives a better life in the next province. Smart pig. You slurp more pottage, now slightly cooler and somehow more gelatinous. Occasionally, a beetle floats to the top. You remove it. That was the protein. Lucky you. A nobleman might enjoy rice, pickled vegetables, even spices. But you are not a noble. You are a cog in the agricultural machine. Your spice rack includes ash, sadness, and the occasional rogue garlic clove if someone smuggled it in. Quirky tidbit time. Ancient Han cookbooks, yes, they existed, described methods for cooking bear paws and leopard meat. So, if you ever find yourself in the capital with a generous sponsor and a death wish, culinary adventures await. But here, in the fields, you'd settle for an unburnt onion. Meals are communal. You eat sitting on your heels, surrounded by others doing the same. No utensils, just fingers, chopsticks, and the ever-present challenge of keeping your sleeve out of the stew. Someone sneezes into the pot. You try not to cry. One of the elders tells a story about a festival feast they attended as a child. There was duck, honeyed pastries, wine. Everyone sighs. That was before taxes increased, before the locusts, before everything tasted like boiled regrets. Your bowl is empty. You scrape the sides. Nothing remains but a thin film of starchy disappointment. The hunger is not gone, merely distracted. You consider chewing on the bowl. It has more flavor than the bread. Back to beer. It's the only thing with taste. It's also slightly hallucinogenic if you drink enough. Some villagers use it as medicine. Others use it as motivation. Today, you use it as both. You hear a rumor that a caravan from the west brought spices, pepper, maybe even cinnamon. But that's a fantasy. Real spice is reserved for nobility and bribes. You're lucky if your meal doesn't fight back. You burp. It tastes like defeat. Still, breakfast is over. You feel heavier, not from food, but from knowledge. You know the day will demand more than your stomach can offer. You rise. You wobble slightly. The beer is working. Good. Remember that bread. It's also used to patch roofs and stop door drafts. Versatile. You step outside, chewing the last crust. It could survive a siege. You won't. Clothes. Let's talk about them. Though clothes might be a generous term. What you're wearing is more like a long-term hostage situation with fabric. Your outfit, lovingly called a shenyi, is a single-piece robe wrapped around your body and tied with a belt. It was once white. Now it's the color of regret, mixed with months of hard labor and zero laundry. You've worn it every day for a year, maybe longer. It knows your secrets. The material, coarse hemp or rough wool, both of which itch like betrayal. No undergarments, because undergarments are for emperors and poets. You adjust your collar, trying to ease the scratchy neckline. It doesn't help. You are constantly reminded that your skin is both an organ and a battlefield. Washing clothes is a theoretical exercise. Water is precious. Soap is mythical. And if your garment finally begins to fall apart, congratulations. You now own 2 half garments. You tie them together and pretend it's fashion. Historians still argue whether commoners truly had only one set of clothes, or if they rotated between 2 rags with enthusiasm. The evidence leans toward yes, and both were bad. Wealthy families had silks dyed in deep indigo or crimson, but you're not rich. You're wearing poverty as a fabric. Shoes? Ah, you mean the straw sandals held together with more hope than fiber. You slide your feet in. One toe pops out. Your heel touches the ground directly. You sigh. These shoes double as exfoliators. If your feet still have skin by sunset, they win a prize. Lice are your closest companions. You don't remember when they arrived, but they refuse to leave. Occasionally, you feel a tickle near your scalp, which means it's time for another thrilling game of, is it alive or is it imaginary? Spoiler, it's alive. You try to smooth the robe's sleeves. They're stiff with yesterday's sweat. The sun hasn't even risen fully, and you're already damp. Somehow, it always clings in the wrong places. Armpit, damp. Elbow, itchy. Back, mystery spot. Now for the seasonal bonus round. In winter, your robe is all you have. You add straw stuffing between layers. It helps for about 5 minutes. Then the wind finds you anyway. You huddle near a wall like a cold dumpling with no filling. In summer, the same robe traps heat like a portable oven. You sweat. The fabric drinks it up like a vengeful sponge. There is no relief. Just more heat, more salt stains, more hallucinations about wearing nothing but clouds. Parasites are a feature, not a bug. Fleas nest in the seams of your robe. You sometimes sleep outside to let them freeze, but they always return. It's a cycle. Wear robe, feed bugs, scratch, repeat. Quirky tidbit, ancient Han noblemen sometimes wore silk underwear beneath their robes. This was not for comfort. It was to distinguish them from you. Their underwear had status. Yours is just you. No separation between skin and shame. Sometimes you fantasize about a new robe. Not silk, just something that doesn't chafe. You picture yourself walking through the market in a crisp new outfit. People turn and stare. You glow with freshness. And then the fantasy ends because someone spills soup on you. Back to itchy reality. You roll up your sleeves for work. The inside is worse than the outside. Damp wool, flecked with mildew. Smells like memories and mild panic. But you can't go without it. Bare skin in the fields means scratches, burns, insect bites, and unsolicited stares. The robe also makes movement tricky. It gets caught in everything. Tools, door frames, your own legs. Tripping over your clothing becomes a daily ritual. People laugh. You pretend it was intentional. Dignity is an endangered species. And shoes again. Those poor, valiant sandals. Their thin soles are no match for sharp rocks or surprise puddles. Your toes develop a sixth sense for pain. Every step is a gamble. The odds are not in your favor. You sometimes envy the children. They run barefoot. They don't know better. You do. And that's worse. As you scratch your shoulder for the 7th time this hour, you reflect on how your robe is less of a garment and more of a biography. Every stain has a story. Most involve spilled gruel and sweat. You tuck your robe tighter, adjust your belt, and step outside, trying to look like someone who hasn't spent the morning wrestling a flea colony. Remember, in Han China, your clothes reflect your place in the cosmos. You look down at your crusty sleeves. Clearly, the cosmos thinks you're a joke.
You wake up with a familiar dull ache pulsing just behind your cheekbone. That's right, it's your tooth again. The molar that's been plotting your downfall for the past 6 months. It throbs with a slow, malicious rhythm, like it knows something you don't. Welcome to dental hygiene in the Han dynasty. Or, more accurately, the complete lack of it. To start, you don't brush your teeth. Toothbrushes haven't been invented yet. Toothpaste, hilarious. What you do have is a twig. If you're lucky, it's from the fragrant Chinese privet plant, which has vaguely mint-adjacent properties. If you're not lucky, it's just a stick you chewed on after lunch. Either way, it's the only thing standing between your mouth and full-scale biohazard status. You swirl some water in your mouth, questionable river water, naturally, and call that a rinse. Congrats. You've now completed the full dental care routine of your time. And yet, the smell lingers. It's part garlic, part rot, part you. Ancient halitosis has no mercy. Your gums are swollen. They bleed when you chew, which is unfortunate, because chewing is kind of the whole point of eating. Not that eating is any less of a dental challenge. Most food is hard, dry grains, stringy vegetables, the occasional mystery meat. Every meal is a test of endurance. And your molars? They're failing the exam. Historians still argue whether the Han elite had access to rudimentary dentistry or if they simply suffered in silence like everyone else. What is clear, you are not elite. You are squarely in the suffer in silence while trying not to scream category. You run your tongue along your teeth and count the gaps. There are more than last month. Tooth loss starts early here. By the age of 30, many mouths resemble abandoned construction sites half built, half demolished, and full of debris. Let's talk about treatments. Suppose your tooth pain gets bad enough that someone decides to help. This is not a dental appointment. This is more of a community event involving a friend. a string, and perhaps a mallet. The most advanced method available is brute force yank it out, the tool of choice pliers. Not surgical grade, stainless steel beauties, no. These are iron pincers, maybe heated to sterilize them, though it's just as likely they'll burn the surrounding flesh. One tug, two screams, and you're left clutching your jaw like it owes you rent money. And if your jaw becomes infected, well, medicine in the Han era operates on a delicate balance of mysticism, guesswork, and very brave leeches. Bloodletting is still in vogue because nothing says fix the tooth like draining your arm. If you're lucky, someone might burn incense near your face and chant about fire energy being trapped in your gums. This is considered a valid treatment. Quirky tidbit. Some Han Dynasty physicians believed that cavities were caused by toothworms. Invisible, squirmy little pests that burrowed into your enamel so naturally. They tried to smoke the worms out with heat, ash, and pure hope. Science, your lips are cracked, your tongue feels like parchment. You think about drinking more water to help, but then you remember water might kill you faster than a tooth infection. So you spit and carry on. There are no dental checkups, no whitening trays, no floss. Just a daily roulette wheel of will this bite, break my tooth, or just make it wobble more occasionally. You see a nobleman flash a smile with mostly intact teeth. You wonder if his family paid someone to clean them. Or maybe he's just 20 and hasn't lost the lottery yet. You lower your gaze and avoid smiling altogether. Smiles in Han China overrated. At night, the pain intensifies. You lie on your back, staring at the roof, counting the seconds between throbs. Every heartbeat sends a new jolt down your jawline. Sleep becomes an abstract concept. You shift onto your side, hoping the pressure might relieve it. It doesn't. You fantasize about an ancient cure, maybe a magical elixir brewed from mountain herbs and fish bile. You drink it twice, even if it tasted like wet charcoal. But those elixirs are reserved for emperors and generals. You're just hoping for a day without chewing pain. Historians still debate whether herbal poultices used on the gums were genuinely effective or just elaborate placebo rituals. You'd take either right now, placebo or not. You'd gladly rub a fermented cabbage leaf on your face if it would silence the agony for an hour. You see a neighbor walking around with a cloth tied tightly under his chin. He's holding a warm brick against his face. That's the Han Dynasty version of a heating pad. You make a note to try it later. Anything to quiet the rebellion inside your mouth. By morning, the tooth still aches. You bite into breakfast and flinch. A sharp pain shoots through your skull like a lightning bolt wrapped in regret. You swallow carefully, favoring the other side. It doesn't help. There is no good side. You are living in a world where mouth pain is a constant, where dental hygiene is a fantasy, and where the only real option is acceptance. Welcome to the ancient smile. It hurts. Your back cracks before your eyes even open. That's how you know the day has begun. Or rather, that the struggle resumes. You rise from the stiff straw mat you generously call a bed matted, dusty, and full of little companions you didn't ask for. It's still dark. It's always dark when you start. The Han Dynasty doesn't wait for the sun. And neither do you. The first task of the day, not stretching, not yawning working. You're either hauling grain, sweeping soil from trenches, spinning thread, or helping build something you don't get to use. You haven't had breakfast yet. Breakfast hasn't even thought about you. You're on your feet, hauling a woven basket filled with bricks the size of regrets. Han China prides itself on labor. Society is neatly tiered like a rice terrace, except you're permanently parked at the bottom. Scholars might debate the hierarchy of officials, eunuchs, artisans, and farmers. But to you, it's just those who don't carry bricks and you. You're a commoner, a nong. The dynasty calls you the backbone of the empire, which is a lovely sentiment until you realize they're referring to your actual aching spine. You plow, you plant, you harvest, and in between, you dig ditches, carry wood, and hope not to get conscripted for public works. Because let's be honest, public works means Imperial Palace Foundation you'll never see again. And you're not alone. Labor is a family business. Your wife is washing hemp fiber by hand. which means hours hunched over a cold stream, scrubbing until her fingers look like wrinkled noodles. Your children, yes. Even the 5-year-old are out gathering firewood or chasing runaway ducks that don't want to be lunch. School. That's for boys with rich fathers and shoes. You want a break, there is none. The Han calendar is a rotating door of agricultural seasons and imperial rituals. And you don't get a day off unless a freak sandstorm pins you to your house. Even then, you're expected to make repairs. Sore arm, use the other one. Pregnant work slower, but still work. Dead well. At least that's the end of your shift. You have tools. Technically, a bronze hoe, a dull sickle, a plough made of wood and good intentions. These are the tools your grandfather used. They'll break, eventually. So will you. But until then, keep digging. Historians still argue whether laborers under the Han benefited from advancements in statecraft and Confucian ethics, or whether those were just clever ways of saying work more, complain less. Here's a fun fact. There are actual government quotas. You're expected to deliver a certain amount of grain or silk every tax cycle. Can't meet the quota, they'll take it in labor. Still can't pay, welcome to state slavery, aka indentured public service. Suddenly, backbreaking becomes literal. Quirky tidbit, one Han text recommends chewing raw ginger while working to fortify the spirit. You try it once. Your mouth burns for hours, your stomach sours, and your spirit remains extremely unfortified. Today, you're helping dig a new irrigation canal. It's hot. The sun stares down like it's judging your posture. The earth is dry, cracked like your hands. Your fellow laborers are silent, their mouths dry and eyes glassy. You communicate via grunts and hopeful shrugs. One guy is clearly crying, but no one says anything. Crying uses water. Around noon, you're granted a break. Not because your body needs it, but because the overseer needs his tea. You collapse under a mulberry tree and gnaw on some cold millet. It tastes like what sadness would taste like if it were slightly grainy. You dream of soup. Not even good soup, just warm. Watery soup, you can't afford dreams. Your muscles cramp by mid-afternoon. Your shirt clings to your back, soaked with sweat. You stand in muddy water, trying to angle a shovel just right to avoid a rock the size of ambition. You fail. The shovel clinks uselessly, sending a vibration up your spine and into your soul. Women working beside you are no better off. They crush grain with stone rollers, kneel on hard-packed earth to shell beans, and carry buckets twice their body weight. Feminism hasn't arrived yet. Equality exists, but only in exhaustion. The sun eventually dips, mercifully. Your shift ends not with a whistle, but with a barked order and the gentle thud of someone fainting. You drag yourself home, or what counts as home. Your arms don't work. Your knees are throwing a rebellion. Your back wants to unionize. Dinner is thin porridge and wilted greens. You don't speak during dinner, not out of custom, but because moving your jaw hurts. Your entire body is a low-grade earthquake of pain. You stare at the ceiling. The thatch roof is leaking again. You make a mental note to fix it. Maybe tomorrow. Maybe never. You close your eyes, praying the rooster won't crow too early, but you know it will. You wake up to your favorite sensation, the cold edge of reality slapping you in the face. It's still dark outside, but the weather's already making decisions for your bones. This morning, it's winter again, which in Han China means hope you like being a popsicle. There's no insulation in your house. Not even pretend insulation, like hay stuffed into the walls. Just thin, brittle wooden planks with the kind of draft that could carry away small livestock. You're wrapped in your only blanket, a tattered piece of hemp cloth that's seen better dynasties. Your breath fogs the air as you exhale, forming little clouds of despair. Winter nights are long, too long, and you don't sleep so much as survive unconsciousness. You huddle together with your family under one roof, literally pressed against each other like dumplings in a steamer. Only without the steam, or warmth, or edible joy. You crawl out from the warmth of body heat and face the floor. It's frozen. Not cold, frozen. Your feet greet the ice with a silent scream, and you brace for the worst part, getting dressed. Spoiler alert, your clothes are also frozen. You shake them like dried seaweed, trying to soften them enough to not snap in half. Still, there's work to do. There's always work. The weather doesn't care. In fact, the weather is your manager now. If you're farming, you deal with frost that kills your seedlings. If you're spinning silk, your hands go numb before noon. If you're building, your bricks are frozen together like ancient Lego sets. Good luck separating them. Historians still argue whether Han meteorological records reflect meaningful climate patterns or simply chronic human suffering. Either way, your frost-bitten toes are not debating. They are protesting. Fast forward to summer. You'd think it gets better. You'd be wrong. The heat arrives like a personal vendetta. There are no fans, no ice, no shorts. You're still wearing the same scratchy, heavy robe you wore in winter because it's your only robe. It's soaked with sweat by breakfast. And the sweat never stops. You are, essentially, soup with opinions. Your house transforms into a kiln. The sun stares through your roof like it's running an experiment. The air inside is so hot, you consider moving outdoors until you realize the outdoors includes mosquitoes the size of regrets and flies who treat your sweat as an all-you-can-eat buffet. The bugs are relentless. You swat them until your arms tire. Then you just surrender and let them land. You become a buffet. A very grumpy buffet. One quirky hand superstition says if a mosquito bites your left hand, it's a sign of upcoming fortune. You get bitten on your left hand 42 times. You are still not rich. Rainstorms, oh yes. Those come too, but instead of cooling you down, they flood your fields and wash away the last 3 days of planting. The muddy roads become slip and slide death traps. You slip. You slide. You say something unprintable about nature. You fall face first into the rice paddy. There are no seasons, really. Just different flavors of hardship. Spring brings allergies, weeds, and 1,000 things to plant. Autumn means frantic harvesting and praying the grain doesn't rot. And all year round, the air quality is, let's say, textured. Smoke from cooking fires, dust from roads, and that delightful hint of livestock all fuse into a scent you'll carry with you forever. Literally, you can't wash it out. Historians note that the Han Chinese made great progress in documenting climate and celestial changes. But none of those records mention how socks feel when they're wet and never dry. There's no wardrobe rotation, no summer linens or winter coats. You wear what you own, and what you own has decided that your suffering is its job. In winter, you layer your shame. In summer, you dream of nudity but remain trapped in decency. The heat makes you hallucinate about rivers. Not to drink, just to dive in and disappear. Your skin breaks out from the friction of wet fabric. Rashes are given. Itchy spots constant. You scratch so much, you could be mistaken for a percussion instrument. And let's not forget the winds. Cold winds in the north cut like knives. Sand-laced gusts from the west turn your cheeks into sandpaper. If the weather had a personality, it would be a vengeful ex. Still, you trudge on. The crops won't plant themselves. The silk won't spin. The roof won't fix itself when hail turns it into confetti. So, you adapt. You drink hot soup in summer to sweat out the heat. You stuff straw in your clothes in winter like a makeshift human scarecrow. But mostly, you dream. Of shade. Of fire. Of a day when your body temperature isn't trying to kill you. You reach for water. The most basic human need. The thing you assume will save you and immediately regret that optimism. Because in Han Dynasty China, water is less a source of life and more a daily lottery with dysentery as the jackpot. The well, if your village is lucky enough to have one, is shared by everyone. And by everyone, we mean people, animals, and bacteria on holiday. The bucket rope squeaks as it's pulled up, revealing cloudy water filled with floating mysteries, bits of hay, insect wings, possibly a ghost of a frog. You pretend it's soup. You drink anyway. Most people don't boil their water. Firewood is precious, time is tight, and you're already late for fieldwork. So you sip and pray. Your stomach starts a countdown. You feel every gurgle like a betrayal. And when it hits, well, we already discussed toilets. Let's just say, you start eyeing every shrub like a sanctuary. Bathing is theoretically encouraged. In practice, it's the equivalent of organizing a parade. First, you need enough water, which involves hauling heavy buckets from the river, then heating it over a slow, smoky fire. By the time you're ready to bathe, you've already sweat enough to require a second one. So you skip it. Most people do. You wash your face with a damp rag and consider yourself glamorous. A full-body scrub is reserved for festivals, weddings, or if someone really important dies. And even then, it's more symbolic than sanitary. There's a belief that bathing too often weakens the body. The logic pores open, evil enters. And who are you to argue with ancient biochemistry? One influential medical text warned against over-cleansing for fear of draining chi. Another suggested onion-based steam as an alternative. Congratulations, you now smell like dinner and regret. Your clothes, stiff with dust and sweat, now double as your exfoliating tool. They scrape, they cling. They remind you constantly that hygiene is an unattainable dream. You itch, you stink, but so does everyone else. So it's basically camouflage. Historians still argue whether the average Han citizen had better access to public bathhouses than later dynasties. One fringe theory suggests that bathhouses served more as social gathering spots than real hygiene centers, meaning they were loud, crowded, and yes, still filthy. As for diseases, oh, they thrive. Cholera, typhoid, intestinal worms, your intestines host more life than your village. You share drinking water with pigs, ducks, and toddlers. You eat food washed in river runoff and drink soup flavored with yesterday's storm. Boiling water would help, sure, but you're out of wood, out of time, and frankly, out of energy. You hear whispers of medicinal springs deep in the mountains, magical waters that heal the sick and restore vitality. But you can't walk that far. You're already late for your next chore. And besides, the last guy who tried it came back with a sprained ankle and a leech in his sock. You dream of a future unimaginable, centuries ahead, where water is clean, clear, and flows from shiny metal snakes in the wall, where you can turn a handle and summon warmth. But here in the Han Dynasty, you turn a handle and get absolutely nothing. There are gods for rain, rivers, wells. You try praying, you offer coins, you drop flower petals into the stream. Nothing changes. Water remains indifferent. It is your constant need and your constant threat. So you ration. One bowl to drink, one bowl to clean, one bowl for whatever disaster happens next. You live your life by the bucket. You are 70% water and 100% doubt. And just when you think you've adapted, the drought comes, crops shrivel, the well dries up, people panic. You dig a pit hoping to strike moisture, but all you get is dirt and sunstroke. You look at the river, now reduced to a puddle with dreams of being a stream. You cry. Your tears evaporate instantly. But you endure, not because you're strong, but because there's no alternative. You keep hauling, sipping, washing, hoping. You live in a constant state of thirst, thirst for relief, thirst for safety, thirst for something that doesn't taste like pond scum and regret. And tomorrow you'll do it all again. Hey guys, tonight we're taking a quiet walk into a world full of scrolls, sandals, and silent suffering. You're not a warrior, or a philosopher, or a temple priest. No. You've drawn the short straw, you're a scribe in ancient Greece. The ink-stained fingers, the endless scroll copying, the chronic lower back pain. It's all yours now. You wake up, stiff and itchy, in a tiny, windowless room tucked above a goatskin tannery. The smell isn't quite vintage parchment, it's more expired feta meets wet stone. You probably won't survive this week. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, post your location and local time. I love seeing where and when you're tuning in from. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. You open your eyes, and your first thought is, why are my fingers already sore? Oh right. You fell asleep mid-scroll again. Papyrus fragments have tattooed themselves to your cheek overnight. Your pillow, a rolled-up sack of olive pits. Your bed, a mat of straw that might once have been yellow, but is now the color of regret. The sun has just crept over the tiled rooftops of Athens, and already someone's shouting about fish in the street. Outside, it's a chorus of carts, sandals, and stray dogs doing their best philosophical barking. Inside, it's quieter unless you count the constant buzz of fleas planning their next raid on your ankles. You rise, stretch your back, it cracks like broken pottery, and immediately stub your toe on your ink jar. a great omen. You're 23 years old, which is practically middle-aged by scribe standards. Life expectancy is optimistic. You were supposed to be transcribing a shipment list last night, but fell asleep somewhere between 10 amphorae and 1 goat, possibly drunk. You shuffle over to the wash basin, which is really just a cracked clay bowl of yesterday's rinse water, and splash a few droplets onto your face. The water is lukewarm and smells faintly of egg. You could change it, but you're conserving water for ink making. Priorities. There's no mirror, but if there were, you'd see dark ink smudges around your eyes and a hairstyle best described as papyrus windblown. You grab your hymation, a woolen wrap that's both your blanket and your uniform, and pull it over your tunic. It itches instantly. Welcome back to the ancient world. Downstairs, your landlord is already banging on the door. You owe him 2 days' worth of rent or 3 scrolls. Depending on your barter arrangement, he's muttering something about late delivery to the tax office. You nod, offer a polite apology, and promise the scrolls by sundown. You have no intention of finishing them by sundown. You chew a bite of leftover barley bread, it's hard enough to chip a tooth. Which would be funnier if it hadn't already happened once last season. The bread pairs perfectly with the sense of impending deadline. You sip watered-down wine from a chipped clay cup and pretend it's coffee. It isn't. You step outside and immediately squint. The sunlight bounces off white marble like Zeus himself is holding a mirror up to your face. The agora is already bustling with citizens who woke up on the right side of history merchants. Politicians, idle philosophers with olive oil-slicked hair arguing over metaphysics. You, meanwhile, are mentally cataloguing every ink stain on your tunic. And your day hasn't even started. There's a saying around here, the sword is mighty, but the scroll gets copied 3 times before lunch. Or at least, it should be a saying. You're not important enough to coin sayings. Still, you are literate, and in ancient Greece. That's technically elite. Technically. But being able to read doesn't mean you're respected. You're the invisible machinery of democracy copying tax laws, debts, supply inventories, death lists. And when the ink smudges, it's your fault. When the math doesn't add up, also your fault. When someone says they never borrowed that much grain, guess who's getting questioned? Historians still argue whether scribes like you were revered intellectuals or glorified ink slaves. You'd love to join the debate if you had the time, or weren't so tired, or had even a single minute to spare between transcription sessions. Because today, like every other day, you're expected to do the work of 5 men, using tools that haven't evolved since Homer. Your pen, a sliver of reed sharpened by chewing on one end. Your ink, a handmade potion of soot, vinegar, and a dash of saltwater tears. The quill breaks constantly. The ink clogs, and your right wrist hums with the dull throb of carpal tunnel, 2,000 years before the diagnosis exists. And you haven't even gone to the toilet yet. But that's a problem for future you once your landlord stops hovering. Right now, you just nod, smile politely, and shuffle toward your little table. A new scroll awaits, blank and full of silent judgment. The sun is rising, the ink is drying, and the ancient Greek workday waits for no one, especially not a scribe. Your body protests with every step toward your desk. And it's not even a desk. Really, it's more of a wooden plank balanced precariously on 2 crates, one of which wobbles in protest every time you rest your elbow. The plank is covered with ink blotches, dried wax, and the faint outlines of what you think might be yesterday's lunch. You sit on a stool so lopsided. It's become a test of core strength just to remain upright. Congratulations, you're now officially working. The scroll in front of you is blank. Smugly so. It seems to whisper, "Go ahead, impress me." You dip your reed pen into the ink, a mixture you carefully boiled 2 days ago, using soot scraped from your cooking pit and a bit of vinegar that was almost too spoiled to use. And then, of course, there's the gluey bit of gum Arabic, imported from gods know where, sold by a merchant who definitely swindled you. You begin writing, slowly, carefully, and it smears, instantly. You clench your jaw and whisper one of the few things in ancient Greek that's definitely not appropriate for a PG-13 audience. You wipe the blot with a rag that was once a sock and try again. your fingers now trembling from both caffeine withdrawal and pure existential dread. After a few hours of steady copying, the letters begin to blur. Your hand cramps into a claw, and you're questioning every choice that brought you here, from learning your letters to agreeing to work for barley wages and exposure. Exposure doesn't pay the rent. Every now and then, a rat scurries across the floor near the wall where moisture seeps up through cracked stone. It's not alarming anymore. In fact, he's practically a co-worker. You've named him Aristotle. He's a terrible philosopher, but at least he doesn't critique your penmanship. You hear voices outside, laughter, conversation. The odd donkey bray. You do not participate. You have deadlines. And also, you smell faintly of warm ink and desperation. Around midday, your landlord sends up a guest. It's a tax official, carrying a scroll that needs copying by nightfall. It's dense, it's in bad handwriting, and it's double-sided. Your eye twitches involuntarily. The official offers a single olive as payment. Not a jar, one single olive. You accept. Obviously, the scribe life isn't glamorous, but it is vital. In theory, without you, contracts can't be filed, debts aren't recorded, and shipping manifests turn into chaos. That said, no one thanks you. Ever. In fact, your most consistent interaction with others is someone yelling. You misspelled drachma again, even though their own handwriting looks like it was done mid-seizure on horseback. Historians still argue whether scribes in ancient Greece were trained in formal schools or apprenticed privately under mentors. You were trained by your uncle, who was partially blind, fully bitter, and deeply fond of sarcasm. He called you Myopicus Maximus. You laughed the first time, not the 12th. To stay awake, you chew dried fig slices between lines. They stick to your teeth and make your mouth feel like you're smuggling sap. But they keep you conscious, which is more than can be said for your left leg, which has gone entirely numb from sitting cross-legged so long. Occasionally, a temple priest drops by with a commission to copy verses or ritual prayers. These are the good jobs because they come with actual coins and, sometimes, snacks. Last week, you got a stale sesame cake. It was the highlight of your month. Then there are the philosophical texts. Oh, the endless circular debates about virtue, nature, fate. You copy the same argument 3 times over in different voices. And by the end, you don't know who believes what anymore. 1 minute, you're convinced the soul is immortal, the next. You're trying to remember if you even have a soul or if it left when you copied the Iliad 4 times during plague season. You scratch your head, dislodging a bit of papyrus dust, and glance out the window slit. There's a boy in the alley, spinning in circles, chasing a hoop. He's laughing. A philosopher once said, "The unexamined life is not worth living." But right now, the unexamined life without scrolls, ink or deadlines looks pretty fantastic. By late afternoon, your fingers are permanently curved. You've stained 3 scrolls, broken 2 pens, and used up your last bit of soot. You consider burning one of your own finished scrolls just to harvest the ash. You won't. Of course, that would be sacrilege, or worse, wasteful. Still, a part of you imagines the freedom of running out of ink. No more lists, no more copying. Just silence, maybe even sleep. But then again, no ink means no pay. And no pay means no bread. And no bread means, well, we'll cover that in the next section. The sun begins to tilt westward. A mosquito buzzes near your ear. You swat at it and knock over your pen. Ink splashes across the scroll. Of course it does. You sigh, pick up another sheet, and start again. Now you've had just enough sleep deprivation and scrolling to think it might be time for a short break. And you're right, your body agrees. Your spine is begging. Your stomach growling like Cerberus guarding the underworld. But first, nature calls. Here's the thing about being a scribe in ancient Greece. Your access to knowledge far outweighs your access to plumbing. You grab the clay oil lamp, which sputters like it might give up on life any second, and shuffle out into the alleyway. This, unfortunately, is where you go to relieve yourself. Yes, the alleyway. You hug the wall in a squat, only achievable after months of inflexible stool practice. Nearby is a chamber pot. It is, at best, decorative. At worst, a biohazard. You avoid it because yesterday it overflowed, and yes, it's still there. Just bubbling. You may have read about the grandeur of Greek architecture, marble columns, glorious amphitheaters. But those never mention the smell. Spoiler, it's a combination of soured fish, yesterday's bread soup, warm feces, and something floral but aggressive. You once made the mistake of trying to trace the floral scent. You found a dead goat wearing a garland. Toilet paper cute. There's a sponge on a stick, affectionately nicknamed xylospongian. Shared, communal. No one knows who used it last. You whisper a prayer and opt for pebbles instead, smooth ones. Ideally, scholars still argue whether leaves, cloth, or even broken ceramics were preferred. You suspect none of the above. You finish your business, and as you retie your rope belt, Greek fashion tunics, but make it drafty. You remember there's no sewage system, not unless you count gravity and collective denial. Everything seeps downhill. If you live near the agora, that's downhill. Good luck during rain. Public toilets do exist. They're basically stone benches with holes carved out over a shallow trough. No privacy, just a row of half-naked philosophers discussing metaphysics while someone attempts not to make eye contact. Toilets in ancient Greece are less sanitation and more social experiment, and often a small public event. You once tried visiting a temple, hoping the gods might provide better facilities. What you got was a pit behind the building and a crow that watched too intently. You named it Socrates. It judges your technique, every time. The rich, those lucky enough to own 2 sandals and a goat, sometimes have a chamber room with a lid. Luxury. Though, to be fair, the lid is usually a cracked plank with a rock on it. And their servants, who you absolutely aren't jealous of, you are. Take the waste outside at dawn, which means the roads are lovingly lined with contributions from every household. Garbage day every day. Some city officials claim to clean the streets regularly. Historians still argue whether that means once a month, or simply shouting, "Don't step there," and hoping for the best. The smell follows you like a curse. You wipe your sandals in a patch of sand and head back inside. Except your foot hits something mushy. Nope, you're not investigating. You take one last deep breath, which is a mistake, and return to your scrolls. The ink, at least, doesn't smell like despair. Not strongly. Anyway, by the way, plumbing won't become moderately functional for another couple of centuries. And when it does, you'll be long dead, possibly of tetanus, more likely of shame. Oh, and if you were hoping to bathe off the stench later, stay tuned. The next section features food, but spoiler alert, that won't help either. You're back at your wooden writing desk, or rather, plank on rock, trying to forget what just happened outside. But as your stomach audibly protests, it reminds you that surviving as a scribe in ancient Greece isn't just about scrolls and sanitation, it's also about what's for lunch, and breakfast, and dinner, which, conveniently, are often the exact same thing. You don't so much eat as you endure. Today's menu features a steaming bowl of masa a thick, barley porridge with the personality of drywall paste and the consistency of pre-chewed bread, barley the grain that makes you miss rice, oats, or frankly, your dignity. It's not hot, it's not cold, it's just existing, like your will to live. You dip a crust of black bread into the porridge. Crust is a generous term. This bread has the texture of sandstone and the flavor of disappointment. You once dropped a loaf on your foot and limped for 2 days. Historians still argue whether Greek bakers hardened the crusts intentionally to use them as weapons, currency, or an early version of a burglar alarm. And this isn't even the worst part, because the flour often mixed with sawdust. Or if you're lucky, ground chickpea hulls, protein, they say. Wood chips, you reply. Spices don't make yourself laugh. You use olive oil for flavor unless you can't afford it. In which case, you use a blessing from the god saltwater, or a moldy fig. Once, you tried fermenting wild herbs for seasoning and accidentally created a laxative so potent the priest stopped speaking to you. Meat, you're hilarious. Occasionally, a stray pigeon sacrifices itself to the stew, but mostly your protein comes from lentils, beans, or fermented fish, paste gyros, which smells like regret and tastes like betrayal. It's basically ancient Greece's answer to, what if tuna could punish you? Drinks you'd think wine would help, and it does, briefly. Except it's mixed with water murky, parasite-rich water that may or may not send you into 3-day gastrointestinal combat. It's a gamble. Tipsy or typhoid milk is rare, usually from goats, often sour, and sometimes so thick it needs to be chewed. But you drink it anyway, because thirst is a stronger motivator than taste. Historians still argue whether goat milk was a delicacy or a punishment. Now, if you were a philosopher or a well-placed official, you'd enjoy cheese, honey, olives, maybe even dates. But you're a scribe. You write about banquets you'll never attend while chewing a barley brick that might outlive you. Your mealtime entertainment is a neighbor's baby crying and the distant sound of a pottery vendor arguing with a man who may have stolen a vase and used it as a helmet. The soundtrack of the city angry goats, aggressive sneezing, and stomachs singing their sad symphonies. The good news, your diet keeps you lean. The bad news, you're not fit, you're malnourished. There's a difference. Your hair is thinning. Your skin looks like it's permanently surprised. You're 25 and look 50. On the plus side, nobody expects you to live past 40. Retirement planning, never heard of her. And if you're wondering about dessert, here's a treat: dried figs, which you cherish until you bite into one and discover it's home to a protein source with legs. You scream internally, maybe externally. No one reacts. You drink the last of your wine-water hybrid and look down at your bowl. Somehow, it's not empty. It's multiplying. Either the porridge is sentient, or your spoon has unionized and gone on strike. You set the bowl aside and declare defeat. Eating in ancient Greece is not an experience. It's a test of endurance. And you fail. Daily. But don't worry, at least you're dressed for the occasion. Or not. That's coming up next. The first thing you notice about your clothes is they haven't changed. Not just unchanged today, but unchanged since the Dionysia festival 3 moons ago, when someone spilled wine on your tunic and called it a blessing. You've worn that same tunic every day since. It now smells like old barley, dried sweat, and something vaguely philosophical. You don't ask questions. Ancient Greek fashion for scribes. One word: chiton, a simple rectangle of coarse wool, fastened with brooches or rope. If you're feeling spicy, you belt it with leftover string from your scrolls. You tell yourself it's minimalist. It's actually just the only option. There's no cotton, no linen, no laundry rotation. You sleep, eat, write and sneeze into the same itchy, slightly crunchy outfit. It doesn't fit, it hangs. And not in a stylish toga at the forum way, more in a wet blanket on a clothesline kind of way. You own one pair of sandals, leather, if you're lucky, rope, if you're not. But they offer all the comfort of cardboard soaked in vinegar. The straps dig into your ankles like they're being paid to sabotage your circulation. Walking, it's a gamble. Running, you'd rather crawl. Historians still argue whether Greek sandals were designed for function or just to slowly destroy morale. If it rains, the wool gets wet and holds moisture like a toxic sponge. And if it's hot, surprise wool also bakes you like a fig wrapped in sadness. The Greeks didn't invent air conditioning, but they did invent tough it out and stop whining. So here you are, sweating under the sun, your tunic clinging to you like a needy cousin. Washing your clothes. Absolutely. In theory, but water is limited, soap is rare, and scrubbing a wool tunic on a rock is less laundry day and more wool-based violence. You once tried washing your chiton in the river. It came back heavier, greyer, and possibly sentient. You haven't dared try again. Underwear, that's adorable. Greeks didn't really do undergarments. Unless you were a hoplite wearing a perizoma, a type of loincloth that doubled as a punishment. You're going commando, in every sense of the word. Parasites, of course, lice, fleas, and their extended family. You scratch. You pretend it's casual. It's not. You once counted how many bugs lived in your tunic for fun. You lost count at 57. They've unionized. You consider shaving your head, after all. Baldness was common. But razors are bronze and mostly designed for cutting, not grooming. A misstep could cost you an ear. So instead, you scratch. Again, the wealthy. They have multiple outfits. Silks from the East, perfumes from Egypt, dyed fabrics in deep purples and blues. You, however, are dressed like a clay pot with self-esteem issues. The only dye you know is the one in your ink pot. And it smells better than your armpits. Fragrance. You crush herbs and rub them on your neck like you're marinating. It only works until noon. Then the sun turns you into a mobile stew. Your best friend once mistook your scent for burnt chickpeas. You didn't correct him. The good news, no one judges. Everyone smells like labor and despair. You fit in beautifully. Still, you sometimes fantasize about clean linen, soft cotton, or dare you dream elastic waistbands. But these are myths, like centaurs or a full night's sleep. So you tug at your tunic, ignore the fleas colonizing your shoulder, and get ready to return to work. With your chiton clinging to your thighs like wet newspaper, you set off again, dressed not for success, but for survival. Your teeth hurt. Constantly. Not just oops, I bet. Something weird hurt, more like every molar is auditioning to explode, kind of hurt. It's a low hum of agony in your jaw, punctuated by sudden stabs when you accidentally chew on the wrong side. And the wrong side. That's both sides. In ancient Greece, dental hygiene is an idea whose time has not come. There are no toothbrushes, no floss, no toothpaste. At best, you've got a twig and a hope. Sometimes, you might chew on a bit of bark or use ashes to scrub your teeth. Yes, ashes, because nothing says fresh breath like cremated wood dust and the slow decline of enamel. Historians still argue whether the Greeks actually brushed their teeth with these sooty methods or whether they just lived with constant halitosis and prayed to Apollo about it. Your gums bleed sometimes. Well, often. They swell, they throb, and they don't get better. The gods have not blessed your mouth. Your breath could repel armies, and you suspect it once did. Cavities are common. And they're not treated, they're endured. There's no Novocaine, no drills, no chairs with tiny sinks. There's just a friend with strong hands, a bronze tool that looks suspiciously like a meat skewer, and some wine to dull the pain. Emphasis on some. You still scream. In fact, pulling teeth in ancient Greece is such a violent act that it's often accompanied by binding the patient to a bench. You bite down on leather, and if you're lucky, you pass out early. If not, the tooth comes out anyway, along with a few shards of courage. The irony, your diet isn't even that sugar-heavy. You're mostly chewing grain, vegetables, and dried olives. But without cleaning, the leftover bits of barley and dates turn your mouth into a compost heap. And unlike your scrolls, nothing written in your mouth gets erased. Decay is the editor now. Toothaches aren't just painful, they're disabling. Try concentrating on your scribe duties when every letter you carve feels like it echoes in your jaw. Try reciting Aristotle when it feels like Socrates is jabbing your molar with a stylus. Every sentence tastes like metal and regret. There's no dentist, but there is a healer who recommends tying a string soaked in garlic around your wrist to relieve the pain. This does nothing for your tooth, but everyone avoids you, which is almost a comfort. And when things get worse, when an abscess forms or a tooth cracks, you visit the iatros, a general healer. He suggests bloodletting to balance your humors. You say the problem is in your mouth. He says the problem is in your liver. You stare at each other for a long time, then go home and cry quietly into your tunic. Some wealthier citizens might have access to imported remedies, clove oil from the east, maybe crushed mint leaves. But you gnaw fennel stalks and pretend it's helping. Spoiler, it's not. The worst part is how common it all is. You look around the agora, and everyone's got that same swollen cheek shuffle, that same half-smile grimace that says, "I'm trying not to scream." Ancient Greece is a symposium of silent suffering, held together by wine, philosophy, and sheer molar endurance. There's even a phrase you've heard, "the tooth chooses the day." You assume it means, at some point, one of your teeth will randomly erupt into pain and ruin everything. They do. Frequently. One quirky remedy, burnt mouse. Seriously, some healers claim that crushing a burnt mouse into powder and applying it to your gums can ease dental pain. You haven't tried it. Yet. But you're getting dangerously close. You lie awake some nights, jaw pounding, mouth dry, and wonder how the gods, those paragons of divine perfection, let something as simple as chewing become your Achilles heel. Your scrolls might be neatly copied, your syntax might be flawless, but inside your mouth it's an ancient war zone. And you are losing. You're up before sunrise again. Because scribes in ancient Greece don't get to be sleepy philosophers reclining with wine and clever aphorisms. No, your life is labor, not the glamorous carve epic poetry into marble kind. The kind that starts with hauling amphorae and ends with aching wrists and ink-stained everything. You think, maybe, today you'll have a light day. But that's not a thing. Light days are reserved for people who aren't born into your station. Your fingers are already sore from yesterday's scroll-copying marathon. And your spine still remembers that time you tried to sit cross-legged on a stone floor for 4 hours. Who knew the Iliad could break your back? The truth, a scribe in the classical period is essentially an overworked photocopier with a pulse. You're copying legal documents, trade inventories, land records, and the occasional soul-crushing love letter some aristocrat wants rewritten on papyrus with perfect lettering. You don't get to compose poetry. You replicate it. Slowly, with a reed stylus that frays when you breathe too hard. It's quiet work, but exhausting in the way only slow, repetitive tasks can be. Think copying a 200-line tax inventory twice, because the first copy had a smudge, and the magistrate thinks your epsilon looks too much like a sigma. You take breaks, sure, but break means carrying water jugs for your master, or being loaned out to help count wheat for a shipping record, or mopping ink spills from the floor with a scrap of your own ruined tunic. Leisure, you see, is a privilege. Your wrists never really stop moving. Women, they're not scribes, not in the formal sense, but they're working too, and arguably harder, grinding grain, weaving cloth, cleaning, child-rearing. And if you're a woman born into slavery or poverty, add hauling water from a public fountain and scrubbing laundry with river stones until your fingers go numb. Historians still argue whether certain women acted as informal record keepers or domestic scribes in wealthier households. But regardless, no one's sitting around composing hymns to Apollo. Meanwhile, children aren't exactly free agents either. By the time they can carry a basket, they're part of the labor force. Boys might be sent to learn a trade, or if they're lucky and their family isn't dirt poor, they might study at a local school. You weren't lucky. You got apprenticed early and learned fast, or else. There's a romantic myth that scribes are respected for their literacy. But in reality, you're just the literate version of a plough, useful but replaceable. You're there to produce scrolls, count olives, draft contracts. No one applauds you for flawless spelling. You just don't get yelled at that day. The tools of your trade betray you too. Ink dries too fast or too slow. The stylus catches on the rough papyrus and tears a hole through 2 days' work. That's your lunch break, gone in a puff of swear words. Soft PG-13 ones, of course. You start early, end late. And the sun is not your friend. Summer means sweltering afternoons where the ink literally evaporates before it touches the page. Winter, you can't feel your fingers, and the reed stylus feels like a shard of ice. Your joints creak like unoiled doors. Some days, your tasks involve hauling boxes of scrolls up steep stone steps, or organizing records in damp basements filled with mildew and philosophical despair. And when you're not writing, you're translating, which means double the stress where one wrong word and a merchant loses a shipment, or a soldier gets the wrong deployment orders. Quirky fact, some scribes apparently used a pet parrot to read aloud texts, training the bird to repeat common words. You don't have a parrot, you have a headache and a mosquito bite in a place you can't scratch without social consequences. You dream sometimes about quitting, moving to a farm, becoming a potter. But then you remember pottery means baking clay in 100° F kilns and inhaling dust until your lungs resemble Pompeii. So, back to the scrolls. You work until your eyes blur, until you can't tell alpha from delta, until the symbols swim like tadpoles across your vision. You write through pain, through hunger, through endless requests from people who think scribe means can you just copy this entire naval manifest by dinner? And yet, there's pride buried somewhere deep. You hold history in your hands, even if you're just rewriting it for the 40th time. Even if your name never makes it onto a scroll, you exist between the lines. Tired, ink-streaked, invisible but essential. The sky in Athens is a kind of aggressive blue, bright, cloudless, merciless. You blink into it as the sun rises, knowing full well it's going to be another day of climate-based torment. Ancient Greece is beautiful on postcards, not so much when you're living in it without air conditioning, central heating, or even a hat that isn't made of straw and regret. It's summer, which means you wake up sweaty and stay that way. There is no cool of the morning. The morning is a sneak attack. The stone walls of your little home radiate the heat they absorbed yesterday. Like a bread oven someone forgot to turn off. Your linen tunic is supposed to help, but it's about as breathable as a wet napkin. You think maybe sitting outside will help. It won't. You step out and immediately inhale a lungful of hot air that smells like dust. Goat. And body odor a sensory cocktail you'd never choose but can't escape. The sun bakes the dirt into hard clumps. And the ground is too hot to walk barefoot on. Not that sandals help much. They're just two flaps of leather and a prayer. Insects adore this time of year. They bite. They buzz. They crawl into your bedding and leave you itching like you rolled in poison ivy. There's no bug spray, no netting. You just deal. A tiny fly circles your ear like it has a vendetta. It does. Historians still argue whether the Greeks understood heat stroke, but you're pretty sure they felt it. Your vision swims by noon, and shade is a myth unless you're lucky enough to work indoors. Which, as a scribe, you do but guess what indoor air isn't much better. The ink thickens. Your fingers stick to the papyrus. Sweat drips onto the scroll. Hope you didn't just ruin an official decree. Winter equally delightful. You wake up stiff from the cold because the stone floors suck all the heat out of your bones. There's no fireplace unless you're rich and no insulation. You pile on every tunic you own, both of them. Wrap yourself in a rough wool cloak that smells vaguely of sheep and mildew. And pray the wind doesn't sneak in through the cracks in the wall. It always does. There are no glass windows, just shutters. You open them, and the cold punches you in the face like a disgruntled Spartan. Your breath fogs up, and your ink freezes in the inkwell. You warm your fingers over a candle and try not to set your sleeves on fire. You'd think at least you'd sleep well, being exhausted and all, but nights are either sweltering or freezing. Summer nights you toss and turn on a straw mattress that feels like sleeping on angry hay. Winter nights you curl into yourself like a terrified armadillo, trying to conserve every bit of heat your body can muster. Spoiler, it's not much. Your clothes don't help. They're not weather appropriate because there's no such thing as seasonal wardrobe when you can't afford 2 tunics. Your cloak does double duty daywear, nightwear, blanket, rain cover, and emotional support garment. But it never dries out properly. Nothing does. Your entire house smells like damp regret. Quirky fact, some Greeks wore petasos hats in summer, wide-brimmed and floppy. You lost yours last week to a particularly rude gust of wind and now just squint resentfully into the sun. There's a thunderstorm once in a while, and you get excited. Finally, something to break the monotony. But it's brief, loud and mostly decorative. The rain comes in sideways and soaks your bedding. Then the roof leaks. Then you remember you forgot to bring in the firewood. It's soaked too. You complain, of course. But complaining doesn't make it better. It just passes the time while you walk to the agora to get more ink, wondering if this will be the day you slip on wet stone, break your wrist, and end your writing career forever. But look on the bright side, you haven't been struck by lightning. Yet, the weather isn't just uncomfortable. It defines your daily limits. When it's hot, you slow down. When it's cold, you ache. And when it's both, because why not, it becomes a kind of Greek tragedy. Starring you, a very tired human scroll machine, and a drafty house with a leaky roof. Still, you endure. Because what else are you going to do? You wrap your cloak tighter, grit your teeth against the wind or sun, and copy the next line of Plato. You step outside to fetch a bucket of water. A simple task, a daily routine, a high-risk activity. The well is down the lane, a generous word for a dirt path scattered with chicken droppings and the occasional goat with boundary issues. The sun's already glaring overhead, turning the path into a dust and sweat oven. You carry your empty clay jug. which is heavier than it looks, especially when your back's still sore from sleeping on something that can best be described as a sack of tired sticks. There is no tap, there is no pipe, there is only the well, and it's public, which means you're likely to spend more time waiting than drawing water. Other people are already in line women, slaves, old men with identical jugs, and one small child with the confident stare of someone who has spilled 3 jugs this week and is ready to spill another. You nod politely and wait. Finally, your turn. You lower the bucket, which creaks on a rope that looks older than democracy. Splash, crank, lift, fill your jug. The water is tepid, slightly cloudy, maybe a fly is doing the backstroke. But that's fine, because this, friend, is the cleanest water you're getting today. Probably this week. You walk home slowly. A full jug is heavy. A cracked jug is a disaster. You cradle it like it's your only child, and in this world, it might as well be. One stumble, one sharp rock, and that's it. You're thirsty. The floor's wet, and the neighbor's dog is licking up your hydration. Once home, you ration the water. Some for drinking, some for washing your hands after writing all day. Maybe a tiny bit for cleaning that ink blot on your sleeve that's now permanent because washing is... Well, let's talk about that. Bathing in ancient Greece isn't a given. It's a social event, a production. For some, it's done at the public baths. For others, it's a rare luxury performed at home with cold water, a basin, and a lot of grimacing. You lather with olive oil because soap isn't a thing yet, and then scrape it off with a strigil. That's right. No rinsing, no bubbles, just oil and a blunt metal scraper. Welcome to the spa. Historians still argue whether daily bathing was common among all citizens or just the fancy ones. But you, humble scribe, are lucky to bathe once a week. Maybe. And when you do, the water doesn't feel clean, it feels like a gamble. Because while that water may look clear, it's carrying stories, bacteria, worms, and enough microscopic enemies to declare war on your immune system. If you're feeling brave, maybe you bathe in a river. It's poetic, it's scenic, it's filled with fish droppings and occasional dead things. But who's keeping score? You wash quickly, eyes darting for snakes, trying not to swallow anything. And let's not forget people drink that same river water, which means every illness from diarrhea to full-blown epidemic is floating nearby. One wrong sip, and your week goes from mildly inconvenient to intestines are staging a rebellion. Quirky fact, some Greeks believed bathing opened your pores and made you more vulnerable to disease. So in winter, many skipped it altogether. They weren't wrong about the pores. They just didn't know what germs were. The result, a community of moderately informed nudists, scraping olive oil off their bodies and hoping the gods liked their scent. When you do manage to clean yourself, there's no towel, just air drying, maybe a cloth if you're fancy. Your skin itches. Your hair, if not shaved off, turns into a clay sculpture shaped by dust, oil, and time. But here's the kicker, you still have to drink that water. No filter, no boiling. Just trust. You fill your wooden cup, squint into the liquid like a nervous detective, and hope today is not the day the worms win. There is no bottled water, no lemon wedge, no hydration apps reminding you to sip. Your hydration strategy is don't die. But even with all this, you persevere. You write, you translate, you blot your scrolls with trembling fingers, knowing that at the end of the day, you'll walk that dusty path again. Because water is everything, and everything is trying to take it from you.